Hello viewers, I'm Ron Grant coming to you live and direct from Tortola in the Virgin Islands. You're watching 284 Media. Thank you so much for joining us for this special report. Panning across the region, the Montserrat Conference has announced that Conference 22, the third annual Montserrat Conference, will convene on Saturday, October 22nd at 10 a.m. via Zoom and live streamed worldwide. Conference 2022 will consider the theme being a British overseas territory. Joining me to discuss the upcoming Montserrat Conference is Shirley Osborne, Chair of the Montserrat Conference. We'll be right back after a quick commercial break.
Introducing a show poised to help guide modern-day men into 21st century distinguished gentlemen. It doesn't always involve suits and bow ties, but raw, real-life lessons. I'm taking you outside in the field to share the journey of some of the BVI's best and brightest men. From East End to West End, Virgin Gorda to Jos Van Dyke, not forgetting Anegada. Our Virgin Islands gentlemen are doing the damn thing. We are the movers and shakers of this generation. The Art of a Distinguished Gentleman. Season 4 by yours truly, Ron Grant. Raising a generation of greatness. Wednesdays at 8 p.m. on 284 Media.
Viewers, welcome back and thank you so much for sticking with us. As promised, I am joined by Ms. Shirley Osborne, who is the chair of the Montserrat Conference. Ms. Osborne, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Welcome to 284 Media and thank you so much for your time once again.
Thank you, Ron. It's good to be speaking with you again. Thank you for having asked me.
Of course. Now, as I mentioned, the Montserrat Conference has announced the Conference 22. Provide us some background to this conference and how it came about.
The Montserrat Conference, we started 3 years ago, actually, just before the COVID crisis, the pandemic began. It began because there's a group of Montserratians who had, over the years, grown increasingly concerned about both the rate and the direction of Montserrat's development in the wake of the volcanic activity and everything that's happened in the last 25, 27 years. And we'd also been very concerned about the engagement, the involvement of Montserratians in that. Because as you know, Ron, most of the population left right after the volcano, yes, including the young people and the children. And so the growth, the development, the natural processes of engagement and contribution got disrupted. And so we are left in a position where there were so few of us and so much to do.
Yes.
And of course, when people travel, when people migrate for whatever reason, even if they didn't want to, you migrate and you start a life. And as much as we hear them say, I'm going to come home, I want to come home, and we hear young people say, I'm going to come home, life gets in the way. And so we decided that we needed to be intentional and deliberate about creating that link, that group of people. And so a couple of friends and me, we got together and talked about the basis for this, called some people, got a group of people involved, and we did our first conference actually in 2020. And this is the third annual conference because we also do smaller conferences, meetings, if you will, on individual topics. So we've done one on population, because Montserrat really needs population. We've done one on access and energy and education and so on. And then last year, we asked the question, how do you solve a problem like Montserrat? And that generated some controversy because there are people who said, oh, you're saying that Montserrat is not, no, which of course is part of what we were saying. And over the year, since then, we have, come to terms with the realization that the problems, the challenges, the difficulties that Montserrat's encountering has to do, that it's wide. And there's some that we were reluctant to accept, possibly, and that is the attitudes, for want of a better term, of people who have the authority, the ability to do this work, to participate, to help Montserrat, to support Montserrat. And we realized that if we didn't fix those, we didn't address that, then the wider relationship, the one with the administering power, would continue to be compromised. And so we decided this year, it was Dr. Daly, one of our members, who said, why don't we ask, if we're meeting so much trouble, why don't we ask on the other overseas territories, how do you manage? How do you navigate this? And then we know that there are ones like BVI who's having serious challenges right now and needs to manage those. And then there are others like Bermuda, for example, who it seems to have an easier time of it. So that's why we did decide to do this one. And we decided also to, at first, of course, we thought about the islands in our region, the Caribbean overseas territories. But then for context, and also because they are the same but different, we decided to ask outside of that. So I invited St. Helena and the Falklands Islands to participate. And then
Wonderful.
Actually I also, yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned, of course, is the issues that are facing Montserrat, which are not isolated. Many of the issues that you mentioned in regards to the attitude and mindset of persons who are capable of leading the territory into a different direction. But in addition to that, in the press release, you also mentioned a sense of identity as an issue and autonomy. Now, that is not a Montserrat problem, as we know solely. It is a problem that we face across the region. Go in depth a little bit more when you speak of the sense of identity of Montserratians and autonomy.
Yeah, I'll begin with one quick story. The driver's license. The Montserrat driver's license, up until not so very long ago, would list nationality as Montserratian. Our constitution speaks of Montserratians. And yet I go to get my my driver's license renewed, and I'm told I must bring my passport. Bear in mind, I got my driver's license in Montserrat when I was 17 years old. And I still have the same number. But I show up to get a new driver's license 3-4 years ago, and I'm told I must bring my passport so they can get my nationality. So my nationality is there, but she said no, because if you're Montserratian, we have to put British Overseas Territory. And I said, no, I want Montserratian on my driver's license for a number of reasons. One, because it's who I am fundamentally. I'm not a British Overseas Territory citizen. I'm a Montserratian first and foremost. And besides, driver's license, we use in Montserrat and use for travel in the islands. So it's not a something I need to travel, I don't know, to UK or something. And so I pay my fees, and I don't go and get the driver's license. And a lot of this is because since we've had these changes after the volcano, and since the United Kingdom has been making this push to reorganize and reclaim, it's the word I use, the overseas territories, these things have been coming down, and Montserratians overseas and Montserratians here are more and more being taught that we are British, we are British, we are British. I mean, the last chief minister, when he won, his opening statement was, Governor, we are British, Governor, we are British, which stunned everybody there.
Right.
And so because of this, and because there's so many of us outside, those of us here are continually being told, and young people are saying this, one group of young people asked me, why should we bother with CARICOM and the OECS? We could get more from England, which might or might not be true, of course. But so more and more we are being told that we are British, we are British. Of course, that only matters, we also know, for certain issues. And so people are straddling this line, not certain. If you want to go to England, you can pick up and go to England. But if you want healthcare in England, you have to walk yourself through a whole series of things before you don't just walk into an office and get National Institutes of Health service. So there is that. And there is the issue of autonomy, because we lost so much. After Hurricane Hugo, we got devastated, as you might remember. We got devastated, but we picked up very, very quickly after, because we were sound financially. But right after Hurricane Hugo, literally, the British people swooped in and decided they wanted to change the country. Brought, my father actually was in office at the time, a constitution that took away our financial services, which was part of what allowed us autonomy, the money to be autonomous. And this new constitution that wanted to, reorganize Montserrat's lands and so on. And then after that, they basically took away our financial services. However, we still managed to come back. And by 1995, we were back on our feet. And then the volcano happened, and Britain has been helping us, quote unquote. And for me, the way I describe it is, people on social welfare, if you're on the dole, you get just enough to get by, barely enough to get by. You never quite have enough. And that's where Montserrat's being kept. So we have enough to, barely pay our schools. We don't have enough teachers because we can barely pay them. Health services rock bottom because we can barely manage that. Been talking about a hospital for years, and we haven't got it yet because there's always something. And so we are there. We just can't get through. And furthermore, there are, opportunities for investment and advancement that we could make. But of course, many of those have to be signed off, agreed to by Great Britain. And
Understood.
Sometimes
I want to ask about the Montserratian diaspora across the region, as well as on the international scene. What has the dialogue been like with Montserratians all across the world who are looking on? They're not at home, but still, of course, I would hope that they have the best interests of Montserrat, in their minds. What has that conversation been like with the diaspora across the world?
Turbulent, unfortunate, unhappy, because two things have been happening. When people lose so much as we've lost in Montserrat, there's a psychological response that kind of has people shut down in a kind of way. And so Montserratians have shut down from one another. And there is this real wall between those who left and those of us who stayed and kept the country going. And it's very sad. It's very painful to watch. On the other hand, a lot of the people all of them, the vast majority who left, they talk a lot about Montserrat. And just the other day, a friend was saying to me, we were never big on flags. And we're not even happy with the flag we have, because it's a flag with an Irish woman with blonde hair. And we've been talking about that for a long time. So we're not even happy about the flag that we have. But those people overseas who have had to leave, they've become very flag conscious and very Montserratian conscious. But when there's talk of involvement and engagement, that just kind of seems to slow down, partly because of that quarrel between those who stayed and those who left, and because, quite frankly, the governments have not done enough to repair that break. When we talk about population growth, obviously, you'd want to, first of all, invite, attract as many Montserratians overseas as possible to come back. And bear in mind that nowadays you don't have to pick up house and home and move. You can come and go easily, and you can work here for 3 months. So it's much easier than it would have been 40 years ago. But successive governments have really not done enough, and that's partly because people say, well, you get everything you want in London, things are so much easier, or in New York or wherever. Come to Montserrat, and if you want something, you want something off Amazon, you have to order it, have it shipped to Miami. It's not as convenient as living overseas. Plus, because things like education and health are in such disrepair, people say, I'll take my children away. I'm going to find work elsewhere. So people want, on both sides, want to work together, but it's really, really difficult.
And speaking of working together, other overseas territories, particularly this conference is targeted at how they manage their relationship with the government of the UK. Now, viewers, the conference membership has asked that this year's conference seek to identify some similarities as well as differences in the relationships between the various British overseas territories and the UK government to help Montserrat essentially understand some of their finer points of those relationships and see if it is all possible to pinpoint any of the areas with potential for Montserrat. Now, engagement and cooperation is, of course, essential, Ms. Osborne, in Montserrat's better development, more mutually satisfactory relationship with the administering powers, even with some of the peculiar circumstances that you have mentioned. I want to talk about the speakers, of course, including Montserrat. There are 7 other British overseas territories who are representative. If you can, please share with us who are the speakers who will be headlining this conference.
Yes, and I just want to say thank you to everybody, because it was one of those instances, one of those times when I put out this call, and I know people are busy, and I have to take into account how small Montserrat is, and you have to acknowledge the, if you will, the relative insignificance of Montserrat in world affairs. But everybody sort of said yes right away, and I'm really grateful for that. So we have from the Caribbean, well, I start with BVI, of course. And let me just say, we were conscious about inviting politicians because we wanted obviously the political perspective, but we also wanted to hear from people who are activists and who are working and just people. So we have a mix of those. So from the BVI, we have Shayna Smith. I don't think I have to, introduce Shayna. She also, among other things, does Territories Talk, which has been gaining so much traction because it's allowing this kind of dialogue among our sisters and brothers in the Caribbean. And then we have Akira Missick from Turks and Caicos. And Akira Missick, she's the Minister of Planning and, I can't remember, Planning and something. Sorry, Akira. And we, in the agenda for that day, what we did is we put Turks and Caicos and the British Virgin Islands together, because we have the islands, the speakers, in 3 sections. We put TCI and BVI together because TCI had the same problem that you are having now. And so how they deal with that, how they've come out of that, whether things have changed, is a conversation that will be useful for Montserrat, because we here in Montserrat are very concerned about what might be coming down for us, because there's a lot of investigation into corruption and all kinds of things going on here that, some people are saying is a waste of time. Some people are saying, so anyhow, we thought that conversation would be helpful for us and also for both of you, for BVI and TCI, to kind of exchange notes. And then we have Angela Burns. She actually lives in the British Virgin Islands. She is going to be moderating that one. She used to work for Radio Antilles and so on. Yes. And then we have what we are calling the richer territories, because when we talk of Montserrat, we think of those things. The economic situation is really important. And so we have Bermuda, Anguilla, and Cayman Islands together. Cayman is a little bit up in the air right now because, as you know, there's a lot going on there in terms of, with regard to their politics. So we're actually waiting for confirmation from there. We will have someone, we just don't know quite yet who that will be. But we have from Bermuda, we have Chris Famous. Christopher Famous, he's a member of parliament, been a member of parliament for a while. And he also is very much engaged in the issue of the relationships between Bermuda and England, and also in regard to race relations in Bermuda, because there is also that issue. So there's the colonial relationship and the race relations and then we have Quincia Gums from Anguilla. She's a young parliamentarian who is the Minister of Sustainability, Innovation and the Environment. And we put those 3 together because the economic situation, Montserrat used our financial services, BVI, and everybody is struggling with their financial services and how Britain wants to change those. So that's a conversation to be had. Plus, Cayman Islands has been making a really strong push for economic autonomy. And so they've had investments in their tourism that has allowed some infrastructural developments that is making a massive difference to Cayman Islands economy, which we can all learn from. And then the last group, we have Montserrat, the Falklands Islands, and St. Helena. St. Helena, I asked a former parliamentarian of mine, a former parliamentarian I met, and the quick story is I met him, we were going to a Commonwealth Parliamentary Association meeting in Malaysia, and it took me 2.5 days to get from the Caribbean to Malaysia. And so I get there and this man says, "Hello, how are you? Welcome. I'm here also. You're here for the conference." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "How's it been?" And I said, "I've been traveling for 2.5 days. I'm glad I finally got here." And he looked at me and he said, "Well, I left home more than a week ago." Wow. Because St. Helena is so distant. St. Helena is 1,200 miles from South Africa and 2,500 miles from South America. So amazing. I had to say, okay, I will not whine about that ever again. And he has agreed to talk to us. He's no longer in Parliament. And then St. Helena, I asked also because we have the access issue. Because although Montserrat's so close to Antigua, we're 27 miles, not 1,200, but we have serious access issues, including the airport. And then I asked Suki Cameron from the Falklands. She just retired in 2019. She was the United Kingdom, the Falklands representative to the United Kingdom, stationed in London. And she's been working with them for like 40 years. So she has deep background knowledge, including, the war and all that. And then for Montserrat, we also have Janice Panton, who also is the Montserrat rep in the United Kingdom. And we put them together because they have these similarities, and also because the Falklands, for example, has relationships with England that other territories don't have, which is interesting. And we've talked about that, or at least I've spoken to parliamentarians here about that. And one quick one, the populations of all three are pretty much the same, 4,000 or 5,000. Okay. The Falklands is about half military because of Argentina and all that. But the Falklands has relationships and agreements with Great Britain for telemedicine, which Montserrat could really, really do with, and for education. So when their students leave fifth form, they've done their O-levels, they can go off to England if they will, automatically, kind of like moving from, I don't know, if you were in Jos van Dijk to go to high school in Tortola. It's no big deal. You just pick up and bring you done. And we don't have that. And so there are those conversations that would help us and everybody else. So that one we're looking forward to. And then the one other person I invited, we thought to put some points of reference. We asked a gentleman from St. Martin, a friend of mine from St. Martin, who's an activist, because St. Martin is both Dutch and French. And the French they're more integrated, if you will, into the European countries than our islands are, but they have some of the same problems. They have some of the same challenges. And so we asked him to give us a point. Okay, this is how the Dutch and the French do it. This is how the British do it. What's similar and what's not. And the whole overpowering thing is unfortunately par for the course for everybody. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. The only person we have to confirm, like I said, is Cayman Islands, and then we're good to go.
Wonderful. Well, I am familiar with many of the names that you've shared, who are key persons across the region who essentially are charting the way for their territories. Mm-hmm. And really maneuvering through this very tough trajectory. The Montserrat Conference, viewers, is a public policy research group that works collaboratively to identify areas, ideas, policies, actions, and resources needed that are vital to Montserrat's development, of course, and to ensure that these issues are the subject of focus, examination, and effective action by government, opinion leaders, and the general public. Conference 2022 would, of course, like all other Montserrat Conference events, support the mission of the organization to really engage with Montserrat's political, social, and economic leadership. And as you have heard from Ms. Osborne, really encompasses a A-list level of speakers from across the region who are going to weigh in on these conversations. The Montserrat Conference is committed to publish policy papers and enhance public education through debate, discussion, conferences, and other activities that will stimulate open-minded dialogue, which is absolutely important, and advanced information, informed citizen engagement. Ms. Osborne, before we go, for the viewers across the region who are interested in participating in any way, is this conference open to the general public? Is there a fee associated with it? How can they get involved?
Well, thank you for that. It is free. It's online. It's free. There is no cost. It's also being live streamed. So the Zoom link is going to be published, I think today or tomorrow. So people can just, if they want to be directly about the conversation, they can register. It's an evite, which we're putting out later today or by tomorrow. And other than that, it'll be live streamed on all the regular social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. What else is there? I don't know. It'll be live streamed, and so people can just log on. And yeah, I say it's free. We do it free because our mission, what's really most important to us is that people have information, and that is one of the challenges with Montserrat. And I hear other territories, not just overseas, other territories in the region talk about the unwillingness of our leaders to engage us in conversation. The idea being, I think, that they're recognizing that when people have knowledge, they have power. And but it seems to us that what we want most is an engaged, informed public, electorate, citizenry. And so we work really hard on that. Everything we do is free. We publish papers. Our website is being redesigned at the moment. It'll be ready again by the time the conference starts. And yes, it's for everyone. And we were really pleased and excited when Dr. Daly made that suggestion in the meeting a few months ago about doing this. And what has shown up is that other people want to have this conversation, Ron. Other people want to have this conversation. So we are also hoping that what comes out of this is more dialogue amongst us, and specifically, and also between us and the others. Because like I said, the other territories, Falkland Islands, for example, we talk about identity and so on. The Falklands responded to one of the British white papers with a very clear statement about maintaining their identity. And the Falklands population is pretty much English, but they want to maintain their Falklands identity. And yet we in the Caribbean, who don't look like the quote unquote traditional British, we're having difficulties with that. And partly because we are afraid, in many instances, to take a stand and say, this is who we are, this is who we want to continue. Exactly, and it's holding us back. So we're hoping that the dialogue and so on comes out of this will be encouraging and helpful for people.
Understood. Well, of course, we are thankful for your time, of course, connecting the region through conversations of viewers. Of course, the Montserrat Conference is going to be held on October 22nd, that's Saturday, at 10 a.m. And as mentioned, it is live streamed worldwide and of course is free. So we encourage you to join the conversation and to connect the dots, because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the issues that we are experiencing, not only in Montserrat, are not isolated. Across the region, we're all essentially in the very same fight. Ms. Osborne, thank you so much for your time. Do have a beautiful rest of the day.
Thank you so very much, Ron. Thank you so much. Take good care.
You're most welcome. Viewers, that's all the time we have. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.